Certainly not the Congress nor the President.
A reminder that you can watch this on any C-SPAN program at cspan.org/video library. The U.S. House is about to gavel in. 8 land and energy bills are on the calendar today. No votes are scheduled.
Authorization Act for fiscal year 2012, in which the concurrence of the House is requested.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on motions to suspend the rules on which the recorded vote of the yeas and nays are ordered or on which a vote is objected to under Clause 6 of Rule 20. Record votes on postponed questions will be taken later. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 944.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 109, H.R. 944, a bill to eliminate an unused lighthouse reservation, provide management consistency by incorporating the rocks and small islands along the coast of Orange County, California, into the California Coastal National Monument managed by the Bureau of Land Management, and meet the original congressional intent of preserving Orange County's rocks and small islands and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Hastings, and the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Lujan, each will control 20 minutes. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, H.R. 944, introduced by our colleague from California, Mr. Campbell, will remove an unused lighthouse reservation currently in place for certain rocks and small islands along the coast of Orange County, California. The bill would add them to the California Coastal National Monument. The lighthouse reservation has been in place since 1935 to provide locations for searchlights and other coastal defense equipment of that time. The bill will provide for consistent management of geological features along the coast of Orange County, and I reserve the balance of my time.
To revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
I yield myself as time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, H.R. 944 would correct a situation in which 2 acts from the 1930s are inadvertently preventing certain rocks, pinnacles, reefs, small islands, and lighthouses off the coast of Orange County from being included in the California Coastal National Monument. President Clinton in 2000 created the California Coastal National Monument, which spans the entire 1,100 miles of coast along California and encompasses more than 20,000 small islands, rocks, exposed reefs, and pinnacles. However, the act designating the monument included only unreserved and unappropriated rocks and islands. And under the 1930s Act, these natural and cultural sites were reserved. H.R. 944 would strike the reservation language in one act and repeal another act to provide that these areas finally be permanently protected as part of the California Coastal National Monument. We support passage of H.R. 86. I apologize. We support passage of H.R. 944, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Balance of his time, gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to yield as much time as I may consume to the author of this legislation, the gentleman from California, Mr. Campbell.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from Washington for yielding. And you know, the facts of the bill have been presented by both the gentlemen speaking before me, and this bill actually passed the floor of this House by a vote of 397 to 4 last Congress. It's simply they ran out of time in the Senate. Otherwise, I think it would be law today. So I appreciate everyone's indulgence with passing this bill off this floor again today, I hope. And it's been mentioned that this was from 1935. These rocks and small islands were originally, they thought, oh, we might put lighthouses there. And then they thought they might use them to help defend the California coast against Japanese submarines during World War II. Neither of those purposes is of much value anymore, and so that's why if we put this in the California Coastal Monument, we'll be able to preserve these rocks and islands and the sea life around them, and they will become a part of our environmental heritage going forward. And with that, I thank everyone for their assistance, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Speaker, I continue to reserve.
Gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Speaker, I have no other speakers on this, and if the gentleman wants to yield back, I'll yield back.
Gentleman from New Mexico.
Yield back the balance of my time.
Yield back my time and urge adoption of the bill.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 944? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, 2/3 of those being in the affirmative, The rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the
Mr.
motion to
Speaker?
reconsider is laid upon the table. Gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass S-535.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
Senate 535, an act to authorize the Secretary of the Interior to lease certain lands within Fort Pulaski National Monument and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Hastings, and the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Lujan, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
Yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, S-535 allow the Savannah Bar Pilots Association to continue leasing a facility at Fort Pulaski National Monument as they have done since the 40s. Congressman Jack Kingston from Georgia is the author of the House version of this bill, H.R. 2687, that the Committee on Natural Resources heard in September. The National Park Service testified in support, and we are pleased that this is one piece of legislation that will not cost the taxpayers a dime. So I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, Fort Pulaski was completed in 1812. The Savannah Bar Pilots were founded in 1864. They've had a lease to use part of the fort since 1940. It would appear that Congress is a little late in getting around to formalizing this arrangement. The Bar Pilots provide an invaluable service by protecting the people and the cargo entering the port of Savannah. This has been a good use of part of the fort and should continue. We support passage of Senate Bill 535, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Speaker, I have no further request for time, and I'll yield back. The gentleman will yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Washington.
I yield back the balance of my time and urge adoption of the bill.
Question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Senate 535? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds of those being in the affirmative. Gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present. Make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2360.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 204, H.R. 2360, a bill to amend the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act to extend the Constitution, laws, and jurisdiction of the United States to installations and devices attached to the seabed of the Outer Continental Shelf for the production and support of production of energy from sources other than oil and gas and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Hastings, and the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Lujan, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the bill under consideration. Yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the opportunity to bring to the floor the Providing for Our Workforce and Energy Resources, or POWER Act, introduced by our colleague from Louisiana, Mr. Landry. The House Natural Resources Committee is dedicated to creating domestic American jobs and protecting the safety of our workers. When we pass legislation that encourages safe and efficient energy development on federal lands, not only are we increasing domestic energy production, but we're also generating the millions of jobs and support those in those industries. And I mean all energy jobs. Republicans in Congress are committed to an all-of-the-above energy strategy. We are committed to promoting jobs in wind, solar, oil, gas, hydro, and geothermal energy, developing all of these resources to ensure reliable and affordable energy for the American people will benefit families and businesses across our country in the form of lower energy costs and greater job growth. To help foster this private sector job growth, eliminating regulatory uncertainty can really clear the way to spur investment, protect American workers, and spur job creation. The bill under consideration does just that. The POWER Act clarifies the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act to ensure the full and fair application of our nation's laws to all offshore energy development, including renewable energy, rather than waiting for various rulings and interpretations by federal agencies. This simple, common-sense bill will provide greater certainty to those looking to invest and develop renewable energy projects and the infrastructure to support those projects off our shores. I want everyone to be clear that this is not a major change in law. It is merely a technical clarification to ensure that federal agencies have the important guidance they need to ensure that our nation's laws are applied in the manner in which they were intended. Although not a major change, it is an important one, and Mr. Landry should get the credit for putting this bill forward. American companies are on the verge of investing hundreds of millions of dollars in developing renewable energy on our outer continental shelf, and they need the certainty that our laws will be applied fairly to their activities. Developing our nation's energy resources benefits our economy, our people, and our national security. I believe this bill helps provide the certainty needed to help move America down the path, and I applaud Mr. Landry for his work, and I urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
H.R. 2360 would clarify that U.S. flagged vessels must be used for transportation of merchandise, supplies, construction materials, maintenance materials between the U.S. mainland and offshore wind farms. The American Wind Energy Association has indicated that their member companies already operate in conformance with the Jones Act requirements for offshore wind farms. The Offshore Wind Development Coalition testified on H.R. 2360 that wind developers already accept the applicability of the Jones Act for offshore wind farms. The Department of the Interior has testified that the relevant statutes already apply to offshore renewable energy installations. In addition, the Interior Department has also testified that H.R. 2360 would not expand current law, but that it would simply clarify that Section 4A of the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act applies to renewable energy production offshore to the extent that there is any uncertainty. Comments on this bill from U.S. Customs and Border Protection echo the Interior Department's interpretation that H.R. 2360 would simply clarify that the Jones Act applies to offshore wind farms. The Customs and Border Protection comments also reaffirm the interpretation that H.R. 2360 would not expand current law to cover vessels responsible for laying transmission lines or other vessels assisting in the construction process, beyond what the current law already provides. We share these interpretations of H.R. 2360 and of the underlying statutes. However, to the extent that there may be any uncertainty that would be aided by clarification, we have no problem with the legislation. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to yield 3 minutes to the author of this legislation, the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Landry.
Gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When I talk to business owners around the country, two things I hear prevents them from putting Americans back to work, and that is regulatory uncertainty and inequity in government regulations. Both the industry and the administration have confirmed the existence of ambiguity in the current law governing energy development on the Outer Continental Shelf. This is creating uncertainty and inequity, affecting job creation. The bill corrects the problems and strengthens our renewable energy industry by giving our stakeholders the information needed to make the right business decisions and investments. It levels the playing field for all industries operating on the Outer Continental Shelf. We agree that to effectively rid ourselves of foreign oil, we need an all-of-the-above approach to energy development, and our laws should follow suit as this energy industry develops. Both sides of the aisle don't often agree on ways to strengthen our energy independence and on ways to create jobs. However, this bill affords us the opportunity to do just that. I'm proud to have bipartisan support for this bill and want to thank both the distinguished chairman from the state of Washington, Mr. Hastings, and the distinguished gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Holt, who helped us on this bill. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Chairman, we have no other speakers. We'll continue to.
I have no speakers. The gentleman will yield back. I'll yield.
Mr. Speaker, we yield back the balance of our time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back my time and urge adoption of the bill.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2360? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from New Mexico.
I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present. Make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose, the gentleman from Washington rise?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2351.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 205, H.R. 2351, a bill to direct the Secretary of the Interior to continue stocking fish in certain lakes in the North Cascades National Park, Ross Lake National Recreation Area, and Lake Chelan National Recreation Area.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Hastings, and the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Lujan, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
Yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am the author of H.R. 2351, the North Cascades National Park Service Complex Fish Stocking Act. This bill has enjoyed broad bipartisan support for some time. It passed the House under suspension of the rules in the last Congress and was favorably reported from the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee by a voice vote. H.R. 2351 is necessary to ensure the National Park Service, in coordination with the state of Washington, has the authority to continue stocking fish in certain alpine lakes in the North Cascades National Parks complex. This complex includes the North Cascades National Park, Ross Lake National Recreation Area, and the Lake Chelan National Recreation Area. In 2008, the Park Service prepared an environmental impact statement regarding the management of the fisheries in these mountain lakes. The preferred alternative was to allow continued fish stocking in 42 of those lakes. The Park Service also requested explicit authority to allow fish stocking to continue within the park complex. And this is exactly what H.R. 2351 does. Many tourists visiting the park for its scenic beauty as well as fishing opportunities, making fish stocking an important component of the Central Washington economy. So I urge support of this legislation, Mr. Speaker, and I reserve the balance of my time.
First the balance of his time, gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I want to recognize the chairman as well on his work on this legislation and the importance of it. And as a general matter, the introduction of non-native species into wilderness designated within a national park should be prohibited. But in this instance, however, the National Park Service has found that fish stocking can continue within the Manther Wilderness without harm to other national park resources. Importantly, the legislation continues significant protections for those resources. We worked closely with Chairman Hastings last Congress to secure House passage of this legislation and are pleased to do so again today. The Chairman is to be commended for his efforts on behalf of the North Cascades National Park Complex, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Washington.
I have no further requests for Speaker. The gentleman yields back. I will.
The balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from
Thank
Washington.
you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation and yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2351? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington rise?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1560.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 144, H.R. 1560, a bill to amend the Isleta del Sur Pueblo and Alabama and Coushatta Indian Tribes of Texas Restoration Act to allow the Isleta del Sur Pueblo tribe to determine blood quantum requirement for membership in that tribe.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Hastings, and the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Lujan, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their mark and include extraneous materials on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Isleta del Sur Pueblo was originally based in New Mexico and then relocated after the 1680 Pueblo Revolt to its present location in El Paso County, Texas. In 1967, Congress enacted Public Law 90-287, terminating the federal trust relationship with the tribe and placing the tribe under the jurisdiction of the state of Texas. In 1987, the federal trust relationship was restored by Public Law 100-89. The Restoration Act limited the tribe's membership to individuals listed on a certain tribal membership roll and to descendants of each individual as long as they have a minimum of 1/8 degree of Isleta del Sur Indian blood. In recent years, the tribe has passed resolutions in favor of legislation to eliminate this limitation, which is consistent with the modern congressional policy of allowing recognized tribes to set their own membership when they enroll Indian people. H.R. 1560 permits the tribe to enroll Indian members without a minimum blood requirement. Similar versions of this bill have been passed by the House in the last 2 Congresses. The Committee on Natural Resources has not heard any objection to passing this bill again. I think it's a good idea to treat the tribe consistently with how Congress treats other federally recognized tribes. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 1560, a bill that removes a blood quantum threshold requirement for membership in the Isleta del Sur Pueblo tribe. No other tribe in the state of Texas has had a similar limitation to tribal membership conditioned on its recognition by the United States. H.R. 1560 corrects this inequity. By modifying the tribal enrollment requirements, the tribe will be able to preserve the unique character and traditions of their tribe based on shared history, customs, and language, in addition to tribal blood. This bill will ensure their survival as the oldest community in Texas and the only pueblo still in existence in its state. Mr. Speaker, H.R. 1560 passed the House under both Republican and Democratic leadership in the 106th Congress and in previous 2 Congresses. I ask my colleagues again to support the passage of this legislation, this very important legislation at this time, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Washington.
I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time.
Mr. Speaker, I yield such time as the gentleman may consume to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Reyes.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my good friend from New Mexico for yielding me time, as well as thanking Chairman Hastings from Washington and Ranking Member Rahal for their help in getting this legislation to the floor. I want to thank the gentleman from New Mexico for handling the bill on the Democratic side, Mr. Lujan. And I want to rise today in support of H.R. 1560, the Isleta del Sur Pueblo Blood Quantum Bill. This bill is crucial to the members of the Isleta del Sur Pueblo tribe, which is located in El Paso, my district, the 16th district of Texas. This will grant them the right to determine their own membership. It seeks to correct unjust legislation approved by Congress in 1987, which imposed a 1/8 blood quantum federal requirement for the tribe membership. This law singles out the Tigua, and if not amended, the tribe will lose their federally recognized status and the right to self-govern their community. The Tigua tribal community was established, as was said by both the chairman and Mr. Lujan, in 1862 after the Pueblo Revolt against the Spanish colonization of the Americas, nearly a century before the Declaration of Independence and more than 160 years before the annexation of Texas to the United States. This community represents a central part of our district's rich culture and our heritage. The Isleta del Sur Pueblo has been an important part of the community's cultural heritage thus for over 330 years. The tribe is an inseparable part of our history, and it should be allowed to preserve its status as a sovereign nation for future generations. So I strongly urge all members to support this bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from Washington.
I have no more requests for time. I'm prepared to yield back to the gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Speaker, just again, we appreciate the work with the majority and the work of Chairman Reyes on this important issue as well. And with that, we yield back the balance of our time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from Washington.
I yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1560? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative. Gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present. Make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose, the gentleman from Washington rise?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass S. 683.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
Senate 683, an act to provide for the conveyance of certain parcels of land to the town of Mantua, Utah.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Hastings, and the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Lujan, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and includes extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
Yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, S-683 would convey approximately 31.5 acres to the Wasatch Cache National Forest to the town of Manuay, Utah. The lands in question are primarily open grasslands surrounded by agricultural lands. The town is seeking these lands for expansion of the cemetery and construction of a town hall and fire station. National Parks, Forests, and Public Lands Subcommittee Chair Rob Bishop is the author of the House version of this bill, and I commend him and Senator Mike Lee of Utah for their efforts in seeing this small but important conveyance enacted into law. So I urge adoption of the resolution or the measure, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
And Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this is a land conveyance to a small town in Utah which requires that the land be used for public purposes. Assuming this measure is approved today, this will be the 3rd Congress in which the House has approved this legislation. We've been pleased to work with Mr. Bishop in the last 2 Congresses to secure passage of this measure and support passage again today. With that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to yield as much time as he may consume to the author of the House version of this legislation, the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Bishop.
As much time as he may consume?
2 seconds.
Gentleman from Utah.
It's great to be amongst friends. Too bad they're not here. 70 years ago, the Forest Service paid the huge sum of $1 for 2 parcels of land that totaled 30 acres, surrounded on 3 sides by private property. In that intervening time period that the Forest Service has owned these lands, not only have they not needed them, they have not used them, and until 5 years ago forgot they had them. The city of Manuay now desperately needs this for its cemetery expansion as well as for a town hall and a fire station to protect people who actually go on the real forest lands. 3 times this House has passed this piece of legislation, and the Senate has found it too complex to consider. This time, the Senate has passed a very similar bill over to us. Not as good as the one we had, but when one considers we have sent over to them a budget bill, multiple appropriation bills, repeal of Obamacare, 16 job bills, numerous regulatory reform bills, the fact that the Senate did anything should be a cause of our celebration today. And therefore, I urge, even though this is not a perfect bill, it's a pretty good one, and I urge its adoption so that we can send it to the President's desk and let the Senate know that we do appreciate them when they finally do their work. I yield back my 2 seconds.
Gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Speaker, although we really enjoy the opportunity to have a conversation about all the work that's happening over at the Senate, with that, Mr. Speaker, we have no further speakers, and we'll yield back the balance of our time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time and urge my colleagues to support this Senate bill.
Question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Senate 683? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative. Gentleman from New Mexico.
On the grounds that a quorum is not present, and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose, the gentleman from Washington rise?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and adopt Senate Concurrent Resolution 32.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 32, concurrent resolution to authorize the Clerk of the House of Representatives to make technical corrections in the enrollment of H.R. 470, an act to further allocate and expand the availability of hydroelectric power generated at Hoover Dam and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Hastings, and the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Lujan, each will control 20 minutes. Chair recognizes the gentleman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material under the resolution under consideration.
Without objection.
Yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Senate Concurrent Resolution 32 is an enrolling correction for H.R. 470, bipartisan legislation introduced by our Nevada colleague, Dr. Joe Heck. Dr. Heck's bill, which allocates hydropower generated at Hoover Dam to a number of utilities in California, Arizona, and Nevada, has been passed by both the House and the Senate. However, some in the Senate insisted that a number of technical changes needed to be made to the bill, even though the affected agency indicated that it could implement H.R. 470 as passed by both chambers. Nevertheless, we will not object to this enrolling resolution making such technical changes because the legislation, the base legislation is important for that area. So I urge adoption of this measure, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
And Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
On October 18th, the Senate approved H.R. 470, the Hoover Allocation Power Act of 2011, by unanimous consent. The Senate also approved Concurrent Resolution 32, which authorizes the Clerk of the House of Representatives to make small technical changes to the enrolled version of H.R. 470. We fully support the proposed changes to H.R. 470 and urge adoption of Senate Concurrent Resolution 32, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Washington.
I have no further request for time. The gentleman is prepared to yield back. I am prepared.
Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Speaker, I urge the adoption of this resolution. I yield back the balance of my
Gentleman
time.
yields back the balance of his time. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and agree to Senate Concurrent Resolution 32? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds of those being in the affirmative. Gentleman from New Mexico.
I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. What about him? The Chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches.
Any personal requests, Brian? Brian? Personal? Yeah, 90 seconds. Start the clock. Emphasize the slowest clock.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington rise?
Adjourn. Mr. Speaker, I move that the House now adjourn.
Question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow for morning hour debate.
So that wraps up today's House session, as members worked on 8 land and energy bills. No votes were taken today. Tomorrow, the House will be working on a bill dealing with federal